We got this sparkly YZ125. Customer dropped it off because it just wasn't running right. It was super rich. He said it was sputtering. He had to clear it out, bad power, oil dripping down the silencer a lot, and he just wanted to run right because he wants to go on trail rides. So in this video, I show you step by step how I diagnose things, what happens when things don't go right because I thought something was causing a problem, but it really wasn't. I show you how I overcome that, efficient ways to diagnose things, going through a simple checklist of what to look for. First, we need to start it up and do a test ride to confirm what the customer said so that we can start diagnosing it. First test. Now we're going to try it without the choke. Yeah, that sounds really rich already. And it's starting to rain. Wow. Is fouled already. Oh, maybe not. Yeah, so what I'm noticing, it started cold without the choke. Sounds like I'm choked up too. That tells me right away that it's too rich. It took a while to clear out at idle, low speed. It finally did. I thought it was a fouled plug, but I don't think that's right. Because if it was, it would have sputtered and wouldn't rev out. The air screw, possibly the pilot jet even, and possibly the needle as well, because it kind of has that sputtering hesitation transition towards the mid-range top end. First, I want to check where the float height is. You can usually do that by leaning the bike over. Pay attention to where the angle is, where it starts leaking out. Right about there. And I'd say that float height is a little bit high. It's right there. Yeah, that's only about 30 degrees. And normally, at least on the Kian PWK carbs, you want it tipped over about 45 degrees before it starts leaking out. And when the float level is too high, that means there's too much fuel in the float bowl, making all of the jet circuits rich. So if we lowered that down a little bit to the optimum float height, then that'll lean out all the jet circuits. So I may not have to do as much with the actual jet tuning or adjustments. With that said, I need to check where the air screw setting is at. Half, one, half, two turns out. So ideally you want it between 1 and 2 turns out, but that doesn't mean it's gonna run right. I could go out to 3 turns out to lean it out, but I'm guessing it's gonna still be too rich. There's 3 or 4 symptoms that tell me that it's too rich on the pilot jet circuit. But before you jump to changing pilot jets, you wanna dial in that air screw to know if you have a pilot jet that's too big, too small, or just right. Because if it runs best between 1 and 2 turns out, that means you have the right size pilot jet. But if you have to turn it out to like 3 turns and it runs best, that means your pilot jet is too big because it wants more air. So you need to go down at least a size on the pilot jet and then redial in that air screw. Whereas if I had to turn it into like half a turn out, that means it wants more fuel, so I'd want to go to a bigger size pilot jet and then again redial in that air screw. So you want to end up between 1 and 2 turns out when it runs the best. So the symptoms that tell me it's too rich: 1, it started cold without the choke fairly easily, just a few kicks. 2, smoking a lot, especially at idle, low RPM. 3, it was sputtering quite a bit, especially when I rode the longer I rode at low RPM and then tried to accelerate, the more it sputtered. This is because it's getting too much fuel at that low RPM, and then when you try and rev it out, it's trying to clear out all the excess fuel, and that's what makes that sputtering sound. And 4, you can tell that when I let off the throttle and it settles back down to an idle, it drops even lower than that. So then you kind of got to keep blipping the throttle, otherwise it's going to die out. Turning the idle screw in to raise up the idle probably won't fix that dropping down low. When it drops down low, that means it's getting too much fuel and you need to lean out the air screw and or the pilot jet. If you want a cheat sheet on how to dial in your air screw in just a few minutes without guessing, even if you're new to carb tuning, you can grab that in the description below. So I'm gonna pull this pilot jet out, see what size it is. All right, got the carb rotated, the float drain plug out, and we can pull the pilot jet out. I wanna see what size that is. It's a little bit hard to see, but it's a 37.5. Looking online, it looks like stock is 40, so this is one size down than the stock size. So I'm guessing someone was already going leaner on it and still running too rich. I may need to go down to a 35. I'm going to order a 35, although this does look like an aftermarket jet. I know Kian has their K stamp on there. I forget what Mikuni has, but this might be an aftermarket jet, meaning it could be inconsistent or inaccurate to the actual size. Won't know for sure until we try it, but with that said, I'll order a 35, but I'm also gonna double check this float height. If I confirm that it's high based on the previous test that I did, I'm gonna lower it, and then I'm gonna put this back in, do another test, and see if it's still running too rich. And if it's still too rich down low, then I'll go down to the 35, because if the float height is off, they're all gonna be off. You wanna start with the proper size float height, otherwise you're gonna be chasing jetting. I believe online said 410 is stock, and it looks to be a 430, but maybe someone went down on the pilot and up on the main to compensate for the FMF fatty pipe. But I'm not going to worry about this main jet size until I get the float, pilot, and needle dialed in. And then the main jet, I do that last because that's only for wide open throttle. And there's a few ways to check the float height. I believe the manual recommends taking the carb off, flipping it upside down, and tilting it at like 60 degrees. Or some people just go based on this being parallel when it closes the needle on the seat. But I've found that I can do it just with the carb on here. With the float ball off, you can see the needle going up into the seat right there. See it moving, that silver part? Once it stops, that is where it is starting to seal so that gas doesn't flow anymore. So once it stops right there, that is about parallel. So you'd think, oh, that's good, right? But I found that tends to be a little bit too high. I don't know if it's because it requires a little bit more pressure once it hits that. So once it stops, and then it requires a little bit more pressure, so the float height goes a bit higher, but I go a little bit lower like that. A few degrees difference. It's not huge, but it makes a difference in float height as well as the jetting. Here to there, if you're checking the height, it's only going to be 20-30 thousandths different, so less than a millimeter different, but it does make a difference. So I'm just going to bend this tab. All right, bent the tab, so it stops right about there. So you can tell the line, it's not parallel anymore, it's a little bit below parallel by just a few degrees. This is going to lower the float height, hopefully clean up that jetting, make it run a little bit leaner, but not be too low where it runs out of fuel at full throttle. Well, I was about to do the first test with the lowered float height, but when I turn on the gas, it's just leaking out. So something must be sticking in the float bowl. Well, obviously the needle and seat is sticking open. Sometimes you can try whacking it with a screwdriver, but let's try blowing with some compressed air, because I don't think it's dirty. It's just stuck open and just needs to be pushed back up. Blow it in the overflow hose. Looks like it's coming out some of the others, so it's probably going to partially flood the engine a little bit. We'll have to clear that out. But let's turn on the gas again, see if it's still leaking. And it's still leaking. Alright, I guess I'm going to have to take the float bowl off again. That's annoying. That usually doesn't happen. Well, just for fun, I sprayed it a couple more times. I got the gas on now, and it's not leaking. So, I want to do the quick float height test. Oh, not very far. So there's still something going on there, or maybe there's just too much residual fuel. Let's shut the fuel off. Slowly kick this over. Wow, this thing is tall. Fired up, obviously no choke, and I noticed I left the gas off, and when I did that, it started to run a little bit cleaner. It idled a little bit better. It wasn't sounding like that drowning out blah 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 and wanting to die from getting too much fuel. So I turned it back on, and then fuel started to leak out the overflow again. So there's definitely a problem. We're gonna have to take that apart. And started running really rich again, really blah, 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 like it was flooding out. I got the new jets, so might as well swap a jet while we're in there. Alright, I got the float bowl off here. You can see this is the needle seat. I just took a Q-tip, spun it around in there. Just visually looking at it, doesn't look too dirty, but cleaning that can help, and then just spray some compressed air through it. And then looking at the float needle itself, it's not super dirty, but it doesn't take much of a speck of dirt to be on it to cause a leak. If there was a groove on it, I would definitely replace it because that means it's worn out. But there's no groove on it, so I'm just going to clean this, put it back in there, and then I'll put in that 35 pilot jet because it's a 37.5 right now. It's always good to test what you have changed or fixed. Float should stop the fuel from flowing when we turn the petcock on. I'll turn it on now. Not seeing any gas come out. Once I lower the float, gas should come out here. Yep, there we go. Do that a few times just to make sure that the float and the needle and seat are actually sealing, and it does look like it's working properly. Hopefully it won't leak again. Well, this is with all the jetting changes, float height, smaller pilots, 35, air screw set, I think 1.5, needle clip position raised, so leaned it out. And I just turned the gas on and it's leaking again. So I am not sure what is going on here. Okay, now it's not leaking. Huh, weird. Okay, I'm just gonna ride it around, see what happens. This is a cold start. First kick cold, no choke. Shouldn't start that easily without choke. It's not leaking at the moment. That clutch lever needs to be adjusted. I forgot to put gloves on. My goodness, what am I doing? I hate riding without gloves. Seems to be running cleaner. That clutch is a little grabby. Let's see how it puts around at low RPM. If it's still running rich, it should kind of load up with fuel. It'll start to sputter when I try and accelerate into a higher RPM. Then I'll gas it. So that was a little bit different. It accelerated pretty well until it got to high RPM, and then it kind of sounded like a blubbering flooding out. I don't know if it might have been right when I let off the throttle, so I'm guessing that would be for the main jet. And one way to test that is you hold it wide open and then you let off just a little bit, and what it does after that can tell you if it's too rich or too lean. If you let off just a little bit after full throttle and you get a sudden surge of power, that means it's running too lean because it wants less air. But if you're holding it wide open and you shut off the throttle and it kind of blubbers, sputters, that means it's getting too much fuel and not enough air, which I think is what it did. But we need to do a little bit more testing. Seems to be running pretty clean at low RPM. Still, well, it seems to be running pretty clean at low RPM, but that mid-range to higher end, it's still sputtering. So I'm guessing the pilot jet and air screw are pretty close. I might lean it out a little bit, but the needle and or main jet might be too rich still. So I'm guessing the 430 is a little bit too rich, so I may change that to a 410. Yeah, it's definitely too rich. Oh, looks like the Stasic throttle and the jet block gasket for this bike is being delivered right now. Sweet, just in case I needed it. So it does seem to rev out pretty clean holding it open. So it might just be loading up a little bit at low to mid-range, so maybe I do just need to lean out the air screw. I want to hear this idle. Oh, it's still pouring out fuel. So that's why it's running rich. You can hear that. So we got to figure out why it's leaking gas. Huh. See, the idle go back down when I turn the gas on because I don't want to make any more jet or needle changes until I figure this float out. Otherwise, I'm just going to be wasting time. Well, I'm going to do what I should have done from the beginning, and that is just take the carb all the way off and give it a full proper cleaning. Noticing this screw here plugging up this hole. This is new to me. I'm not sure if Mikuni started doing this on the newer models or if this is a modification to plug that. Let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, I'll just do some research and figure out what's going on there. This doesn't look dirty. It doesn't look grooved. I can shine. Just looking at it with my eye, it doesn't look dirty. I'm going to definitely polish it up a little bit with the Q-tip, but I'm guessing this O-ring might be bad, causing fuel to leak by it, which is a common problem, which is usually on older bikes. Now, this is a 2017, so it's not super old, but if it was in harsh conditions or had lots of ethanol gas run through it, it could be bad. I can see a little bit of wear right there. It feels a little bit hard. It doesn't look, yeah, I mean, this little mark right there could possibly cause it. Yeah, when I'm prying this off, it definitely looks cracked there. So I'm guessing we have found the problem. Yeah, it's where that wear mark is. It's cracking pretty easily. So I'm guessing this is the culprit. Either way, we're still gonna clean this whole carb. Oh yeah, yeah, this O-ring is definitely cracking, and that is enough to cause it to leak. Already ripped. Yep, that fell apart pretty easily, so and here's the jet block gasket. This main gasket here is just under this jet block, so all these jets are bolted in. This is the block, so you just take these Torx bits out and this pops off and the gasket is underneath. That should be this one right here, so let's put that on. The JD Jane kit came with a Torx bit. Nice, not too hard. Make sure you push down when you're breaking it loose, otherwise you might strip the screw, and if you strip the screw, that's gonna be real fun to get out of here. Ooh, stuff is already falling out. Here is the jet block gasket, and it looks like it is partially deformed right there. So it's not covering these holes, but it's working that way. Even though it might not cause problems now, it may soon. And I believe the JD jetting gasket is a little bit thicker. Yeah, it looks a little bit thicker and firmer, so it should last longer before it causes problems. Okay, gotcha. This is different than the PWK jet block. So the jet block, it doesn't come out. This is part of the casting. It just slides out from in here. It's just this part that comes out. So we'll catch the screws, and then we'll put that new gasket back in there after we clean the carb. There we go. I got the carb rebuilt and I've had the gas on for at least 5 minutes. No leaking. So we should be good to go. I'm hoping it's just an air screw tuning. Test that throttle so it returns so we don't get sticky whiskey throttle like last time. Or I should say on the 85, that little bugger likes to pop the front wheel up once you get on the pipe. No choke. Engine should be cooled down by now. Let's just turn the choke on real quick. It probably doesn't need it. It's a bit warm and muggy today. Humidity is like, it's down to about 80%. It was close to 100 this morning. Alright, clutch lever. Smell that two-stroke premix. It's like we got the local farmer. Alright, did you see that? I had low RPM, whack the throttle, no bogging, so it's definitely not too lean. I think I'm gonna lean the air screw out and see what it does. See, we got second gear, third gear just above idle. Woo! No bogging, no sputtering. This thing is running pretty clean now. Let's just dial in that air screw. Yeah, it's at 1.5 turns out. I'm just gonna go 3 turns. That's about the max you wanna go before the screw potentially falls out. So that way I'll know if the pilot jet is still too big or if it's the right size. 3 turns out will be too lean. It'll start bogging right off of idle. Not touching the throttle. Idle might be a little low. Let's give it a little crack of the throttle. Yeah, I think it might be too lean now. Yep. Hear that bogging? When I whack the throttle. So let's turn it in half a turn. And if you want a cheat sheet on how to do this in just a few minutes, dial in your air screw to get easier starts, no bogging. That's pretty close. Want to turn that idle up a little bit. Oh yeah, I got the lock nut on this Mikuni TMX. Some people make the mistake of trying to dial in the idle speed before dialing in, wow, that's tight, the air screw. But the idle screw, it only adjusts the idle RPM. If your bike keeps dying, the RPM drops, and you have to keep blipping the throttle, that means the jetting is off and you need to dial in that air screw first. Once you get a consistent idle speed, then you can dial in the idle screw. You need to do this when the engine is warm for both of these, because the jetting, the air-fuel ratio, idle, all that changes as the engine warms up because all the parts are expanding. Someone really got this idle jam nut tight. There. Probably shouldn't need to turn it in too much. Need to lean it over so I can start it, otherwise I can't reach. I'm gonna turn it in just a quarter turn more on that. right, nice consistent idle, no bogging. Air screws at about 2 1/4 turns out. So there's a little bit of room to go leaner, but it's pretty warm and really humid. So just riding in Minnesota, shouldn't need to lean it out much more than it is. Let's go ride the trail. It's pretty thick in here. How do I know the jetting is dialed? Well, woo! Those can scare you. I'm just listening and feeling for any bogging or sputtering. If it's bogging, when I'm whacking open the throttle, that means it's still too lean. But if it's sputtering, especially after a long, low RPM section, that means it's still too rich. And the more it does it, the more off it is on rich or lean. Oh, that usually doesn't happen. No harm, no foul. Ooh, it's hard to see in here. Let's try third gear. Yeah, I need to bring that idle back down. Let's see how it starts. One kick, nice, no throttle. That's how it should be. Owner said there was a lot of oil leaking down the silencer, but not noticing any right now. Obviously we only rode for 20-30 minutes, but if there was a lot of oil running out, you'd notice it within 20-30 minutes of the engine running. So sweet. So this YZ125 came to me running super rich for a couple reasons. First, the jetting was definitely off, but that wasn't the root cause. The root cause was the fuel overflow leak, and what I thought was just a dirty needle and seat, because I cleaned it a couple times. I had to take the carb all the way apart. It was that float seat O-ring that was worn out. It wasn't ripped yet, but it was cracking, and it was enough to cause fuel to leak past it, so we rebuilt that. The jet block gasket, just because it was a little iffy and it was going to cause problems soon, and then we were able to dial in that jetting. So now this thing starts first kick easy, idles nice, it doesn't load up or sputter, has awesome power, great throttle response. Super happy with this. I'm sure the new owner will be too, because he wanted to pick it up today to go on a riding trip tomorrow. Oh yeah, and the owner of this has a lot more followers than I do on Instagram and TikTok. It's Mati Man. He's got some supermoto, street bike, wheelie, stunting videos. A lot better at wheelies than I am, so check that out. If you want to get your bike dialed so that you can have it running great, because a poor running bike kills your confidence, especially trail riding. If it's sputtering, loading up, weak power, it's really frustrating and hard to ride with confidence. I got that free air screw guide. You can learn how to do it in just a few minutes. Or if you're tired of guessing on the jetting and you just want someone to do it for you and you live near Oak Grove, Minnesota, check out Fager Power Sports and I can do it for you. And your bike can show up on one of these videos. I'm Kelly Fager from MXHideout. Stop surviving trails and start riding them.